Jaren here from Paradigm Strength Systems.
Let's do that again. The 3 lifts. No, the big 3 for bodybuilding. Are they good? Are they bad? Who knows? Well, I do. So listen up. I first want to address that we are a power building emphasis coaching service, but we still value good, true information. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Now, there are a lot of variation in each of the 3 lifts: the squat, the bench, the deadlift, and today I want to specifically hone in on just the competition style lifts. So, on the overall, what's so great about these lifts and why are they celebrated in the strength training world, even when neglecting the factor that powerlifting as a sport is the product of these 3 constituent lifts? And what are the potential drawbacks of utilizing them in your hypertrophy training? Now, I first must stress that no movement is a must if you want to get bigger. There are only ones that are better than others in eliciting specific goals, and perhaps better for the individual. In most cases, that would apply if you had, let's say, an injury. There are 3 reasons why they're held in such high regard. Now, first, all are compound movements, obviously, meaning they involve more than one joint when moving the weight, thus recruiting larger groups of muscles, leading to a bigger lift. A bench will almost always be heavier than a chest fly at the same rep scheme and perceived exertion. This means you can provide stimulus to multiple muscle groups in one exercise. And in tandem, these 3 lifts involve almost all your major muscle groups: your pecs, your shoulders, your hips, your quads, your glutes, your core, etc. However, this is a double-edged sword. By targeting more than one muscle group at a time, you lack specificity. This is especially significant if you have a lagging muscle group. Let's say you want to optimize the development of your hamstrings. Deadlifts will never do that for you, because despite hamstrings being involved in the movement, in the deadlift, it shares the load with your glutes, your hips, your erector spinae. And this will become a bigger issue if you have an immensely powerful lower back. Second, these are natural movements. Perhaps bar the bench if you're using excessive arch, but they replicate movements that we do or actually should do on a day-to-day basis. Pushing ourselves back up once we've fallen, hip hinging, picking stuff up from below us, knee flexion, loading up before we jump. All these movements mirror those in the 3 lifts. So being adequate at these lifts can definitely have some carryover effects to being able to perform these day-to-day movements with ease or with sufficient. Now, third, you can generally avoid training to failure. Around this 7 to 8 RPE is probably the sweet spot with these movements because they are big lifts. Not only would you benefit from leaving a few reps in the tank because of recovery, but I encourage you to do so to avoid injury. Right, now let's be a bit more specific with each individual lift. Starting with the king, squats. Looks like we're back in primary school with this T-chart, huh? Remember those? Hormonally, squats stimulate testosterone, the natural anabolic steroid synthesized in your gonads. It's responsible for health things like improved cardiovascular health, mental health, muscle hypertrophy, of course, body composition. The study found that especially after 10 sets of 10 squats, test levels were higher compared to other forms of strength training with lower volume. Now, you can increase your test levels in the short run after most forms of high intensity training, but especially so when performing squats. Compared to the leg press, the level of tests in the blood was higher after squatting, according to a study by Shaner and colleagues. Now, what does this tell us? Perform your squats, and with a good amount of volume. Now, you don't need to go full-on German volume training here, but an absolute minimum of 3 sets per squat session. I'd even go as far as to say, for optimal training, go up to 5. as a minimum. But obviously pay attention to your recovery and how you're feeling after each set. Yada yada yada. Another reason it's pretty awesome for as a leg builder, it has enough specificity to build your glutes and quads while maintaining a decent recovery. For choosing to body build up for a high bar, we covered this discussion about bar placement on the squat in our recent Instagram post. But using a high bar position allows for a more upright torso position, so you can bias more of your quads and your legs. Also increases the range of motion. A few things to note is to really focus on the eccentric phase and perhaps even implementing pause reps without fully resting at the bottom when you're astergrassing. The only gripe I have with squatting is making sure you have enough lower body mobility to even perform them, and to perform them well. Some of our athletes have reduced range of motion in their hips, ankles, and that can give rise to a breakdown in their form at the bottom rep especially. So often you'll need to address these mobility issues before putting any substantial load on the bar. So should you include squats in your hypertrophy program? If your goals and body say otherwise, I'd say definitely. Now second, everybody's favorite, bench. Everyone knows bigger bench equals bigger chest and vice versa. I'll even show it to you scientifically with this graph from the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research. As you can see, the y-axis there is the 1 rep max, and the x-axis is the maximal cross-sectional area of the pectoral muscle. That line there indicates a relatively strong positive linear correlation, meaning what I literally said, bigger bench equals bigger chest. And now this could be a case of correlation not equating to causation, but that's the correlation, baby. So the competition bench typically uses a wide grip, and yes, that arch, which while yes good for performance, is not ideal for hypertrophy because it limits the range of motion. I know powerlifters are required to hit a certain elbow depth with the bench now, so make sure you do that. It might not seem like a lot, but that extra ROM at the bottom will make that weight feel a lot heavier because your muscles are weaker at the most lengthened positions. But it is at these stretched bottom positions which help you maximize your gains in each rep. Again, pause reps at the bottom, slow tempo on the eccentric until you get a good stretch is king. Now, let's talk about the angle in which you press when flat benching and how it neglects the top section of your chest or the clavicular head, the fibers that connect to your clavicle, which give you that extra, that boob on top. Damn, I don't have it on that. Well, yeah, that's not true. The stimulus from flat benching is roughly pretty equal across your chest, as shown by the study from Ogasawara and colleagues, and so they will all grow roughly the same amount, relatively. And that's the important bit, because your clavicular head as a section of your chest is smaller than the mid and lower sections. And so when it all grows because you've been benching for some time, the upper section does not grow as much in absolute terms, as you can see. So what would I suggest? If you want that full chest look, bench. For a beginner, master the movement pattern and setup. A good rep range would be 6 to 10. For intermediates and advanced level athletes, 4 to 8. With 8 being a strong upper limit, I'd say, because you want that heavy load, receiving a greater weighted stretch stimulus. And also remember to supplement in isolation work for the clavicular head, like incline presses or low to high cable flies, but be sure to take note of how much volume you're doing for your chest. Now, lastly, deadlifts. As you can see, not a T-chart anymore, more like a weirdly oriented L chart, because I wouldn't recommend this movement for hypertrophy. It simply is not conducive to hypertrophy. And if we review the study by Belcher et al., where they looked at biomarkers for damage done to the body after the 3 big lifts compared to the squat and bench, a deadlift simply did not do as much. Another reason, it distributes the load over many muscles, so you don't know whether it's a leg exercise or a back exercise, which they do put it on a push-pull leg scheme. Who knows? Well, I'd say it's still a majority leg exercise. But then, how are you going to squat? How are you going to do your other things if the deadlift is so taxing? The stimulus to fatigue ratio is horrible. It fries the CNS, impairing you from doing other movements effectively. Generally, not a lot of time under tension, and also it lacks range of motion. So, not a good lift for bodybuilding. It's your strongest lift on average in terms of absolute load being moved, but because it's so heavy and many huge muscles are involved, the amount of time it takes for you to recover from it may not be worth it from a pure hypertrophy standpoint. This could also be the reason why the deadlift is the last in a powerlifting competition, and also generally the last lift in a week in a powerlifting program, because it might affect the other lifts. But you can also tell me that the squats are pretty taxing on the CNS. You're also using larger muscle groups to move the big weight. Well, you can opt for an alternating program where you have heavy squats followed by deads, and then heavy deads and lighter squats on different microcycles or on different weeks. There are simply much better ways to achieve bigger hamstrings, bigger glutes, bigger back even, depending on which muscles you want to target. I mean, if we just modify the deadlift a bit, that would be the case. The deficit deadlift without the dead part, so the weight slightly taps the ground instead of a big drop at the end. You incorporate a slow eccentric tempo where you get the stretch, is insane for your glutes and hamstrings. If you want even more stretch, try the stiff leg variation. Sumo is fine for your glutes if you prefer sumo, but you won't get your hamstrings involved. For your hamstrings, RDLs are also a good alternative. I like doing them with dumbbells since I get much more range of motion, as you aren't as tall as the plates, so you don't need the deficit. Same thing, slow eccentric, focus on the stretch, you will get sore. So try them. Program them near the end of your workout because of the overall systemic fatigue. You don't need a lot of volume, you just need good technique, and trust me, you will feel it the next day. So if you're looking for muscle hypertrophy, the 3 lifts are absolutely god-tier movements for generalized growth, progressive overload. But if you want to maximize your growth, you'll need to also supplement chest, tricep, shoulder, glutes, quad, whatever movements that target those muscle groups specifically, especially so if they are lagging muscle groups. Now, of course, the deadlift is not as good, so change it, modify it to the deficit deadlift variation or RDLs. And so the heck did I just do? Wow, you see that? It's a thick ass fucking hair, dude. So I'll catch you next time for more training, knowledge, and tips. See ya.